I am Kendra, 34 years old, and a forensic accountant who spends her days tracking down hidden assets and corporate fraud across the city of Atlanta. For years, I genuinely believed that maintaining a quiet, respectful distance from my highly toxic family was enough to protect my peace. I was entirely wrong. The elderly woman who lives next door called me late last Tuesday evening. Her voice was barely above a fragile whisper. "Tonight at exactly 11, bring your daughter to my house and go upstairs." I frowned, holding the phone much closer to my ear. "Why, trust me," she replied. "You will see." At 11, I carried my sleeping 5-year-old daughter Lily over to her house. Mrs. Higgins ushered us inside without a single word and pointed toward her dark second-floor bedroom. The absolute moment I looked through her window back at my own home, I froze in pure shock. There were bright flashlights moving erratically inside my living room. My heart pounded aggressively against my ribs. I squinted into the deep darkness, watching three familiar figures cluster tightly around the large abstract painting that covered my hidden wall safe. The sharp beam of a flashlight illuminated their faces one by one. It was my mother Vivian, the esteemed choir director of our local church. Beside her stood my older sister Serena, the undisputed golden child of our entire family. And holding a heavy steel crowbar was Serena's husband Liam, a wealthy white real estate developer who had always treated me like worthless dirt beneath his expensive leather shoes. They were violently prying open my personal safe. I did not panic. My professional life was built strictly on remaining utterly calm in intense high-pressure situations. I turned quickly to Mrs. Higgins, who was holding a sleeping Lily safely in her gentle arms. "Please keep her safe," I whispered. I marched directly down the stairs, crossed the front lawn, and shoved my silver key right into the front door. I kicked it open so incredibly hard, the wood splintered loudly against the interior wall, and I slammed my hand forcefully onto the light switch. The sudden blinding glare of the crystal chandelier instantly flooded the entire room. Vivian dropped her flashlight with a sharp, terrified gasp. Serena shrieked loudly, clutching her overpriced designer handbag tightly against her chest. Liam simply paused, the crowbar still firmly wedged behind the thick metal frame of my safe. He did not look remotely guilty. He just looked tremendously annoyed. Liam pulled the crowbar free and casually dusted off the lapels of his custom-tailored suit. He tossed the heavy tool onto my sofa and offered me a smug, deeply condescending smile. "Calm down, Kendra," he said, his voice dripping with absolute unearned entitlement. "We are merely borrowing Lily's trust fund documents for a bit. You are just a single mother working a boring accounting job. Serena and I actually know exactly how to make this kind of money grow exponentially in the real estate market." I stared right at him, my blood turning to solid ice. "You literally broke into my house in the middle of the night to violently steal my daughter's $15 million trust fund inheritance from her late grandfather." Serena stepped forward immediately, rolling her eyes dramatically, as if I were the one acting completely unreasonably. "Oh, please stop being so ridiculously dramatic," she scoffed loudly. "You do not even remotely know what to do with that massive kind of capital. You live in this very modest house and buy cheap clothes on sale. Liam is about to close a massive mega development deal downtown, and he desperately needs liquid assets for immediate collateral. You really should be thanking us for finally taking this heavy burden entirely off your hands." My mother Vivian smoothed down her silk blouse and nodded eagerly in agreement. "Listen to your sister Kendra. Serena married a highly successful man who provides handsomely for her. You are just a bitter, paranoid failure who always wants to hold everyone else back. Liam is family. He is basically doing you a huge favor." I looked quietly at the three of them, standing comfortably in my living room, casually justifying a severe federal crime. My mother, who had spent my entire childhood treating me exactly like a worthless scapegoat while constantly elevating Serena to an untouchable pedestal. My sister, whose extremely lavish lifestyle was entirely dependent on a ruthless man who openly looked at our black family merely as convenient stepping stones. And Liam, a man so deeply protected by his societal privilege that he genuinely believed he could break into a black woman's home, steal millions of dollars, and simply explain it all away as a generous favor. They clearly expected me to cry. They fully expected me to yell, to break down, and to finally submit to their outrageous demands, just like I always had when I was a helpless teenager. Instead, I reached slowly into my jacket pocket and pulled out my cell phone. I did not scream. I did not argue. I tapped 3 simple numbers onto the glass screen and pressed the speaker button so the sharp dialing tone echoed loudly through the dead silent living room. Liam's incredibly smug smile finally faltered. "What exactly are you doing?" he demanded, taking a quick, aggressive step toward me. "911, what is your emergency?" The emergency dispatcher's voice crackled clearly through the phone's speaker. I locked eyes directly with Liam, watching the very first hint of genuine, unadulterated fear slowly crack his previously arrogant facade. "I would very much like to report a home invasion currently in progress," I said, my voice staying dangerously, unnervingly calm. "The 3 intruders are still standing right here inside my house, and they are armed with a steel crowbar. Please send police officers immediately." Serena gasped, covering her mouth in total horror. "You cannot be serious, Kendra," she yelled frantically, grabbing Liam's arm for support. "Hang up!" The wail of approaching sirens shattered the silence in my living room. I stared directly at Liam. The smug confidence melted off his face, replaced by frantic energy. He dropped the steel crowbar and brushed drywall dust from his suit jacket. Serena grabbed his arm, looking frantically toward the open front door. My mother, Vivian, suddenly began smoothing her hair, arranging her features into a mask of perfect innocent shock. Flashing red and blue lights pierced through my front windows. Heavy footsteps pounded up my walkway. 2 police officers stormed through the front door. I stepped forward immediately, taking a deep breath to maintain my professional composure. I knew exactly how to present facts clearly. "Officers, thank you for arriving quickly," I said, keeping my hands visible and my voice steady. "These individuals broke into my home, destroyed my wall, and forcefully cracked open my safe to steal private financial documents." I pointed at the damaged wall. The older officer, a tall white man, looked around the room. His eyes scanned the damage, moving to my mother Serena and landing on Liam. The absolute second the officer saw my brother-in-law, the entire atmosphere in the room shifted. "Liam," the officer asked, his stern expression dissolving into a friendly smile. "Liam Sterling, is that you?" Liam let out a sigh of relief and stepped forward, extending his hand. "Officer Miller, good to see you, Jim. We missed you at the country club golf tournament this past weekend." In the middle of my living room, while my wall safe stood broken and empty, the responding police officer and the man who broke into my house shook hands like old friends. I felt a cold knot. "Jim, I am incredibly sorry you had to be dragged out here tonight," Liam said, his voice dripping with faux exhaustion. "This is a tragic family matter. My wife Serena and I, along with my mother-in-law Vivian, rushed over here because we received highly concerning phone calls." Officer Miller nodded sympathetically. "What kind of phone calls, Liam?" I stepped forward, my voice rising a fraction. "Officer, he is lying to you. They broke into my house to steal my daughter's trust fund portfolio." Liam shook his head sadly. "My sister-in-law Kendra has been struggling with severe mental health issues. She called us in a manic episode tonight. She took a crowbar to her wall safe, screaming about people trying to steal from her. We were just trying to get her some psychiatric help." I turned to my mother, expecting her to tell the truth. Instead, genuine-looking tears began to spill down Vivian's face. "It is entirely true, officer," my mother cried softly. "My poor Kendra has always been deeply unstable. We came over to check on our grandbaby, and Kendra started destroying the walls." Serena chimed in, clutching Liam's arm. "She is highly delusional, Officer Miller. We just want to get her the medical help she desperately needs." I stood completely still. They were willing to paint me as a dangerous black woman to the police, knowing the severe consequences that stereotype carried. Officer Miller turned to look at me. His eyes were cold, hard, and deeply dismissive. Listen to me carefully, ma'am," the officer said, stepping close to my personal space. "Filing a false police report is a serious crime. Wasting city resources because you are having a family dispute is completely unacceptable. If I get called out to this house one more time tonight, I am taking you to the county jail for disorderly conduct, and I will be calling Child Protective Services to take custody of your daughter. Do you understand me? The sheer injustice burned in my throat. Arguing with a biased police officer who was friends with my wealthy brother-in-law would only end with me in handcuffs and my daughter in foster care. I understand completely, officer. Good, Officer Miller said sharply. He turned back to Liam, clapping him gently on the shoulder. Take care of your family, Liam. The police officers walked out of my house, ignoring the destroyed wall. As soon as the patrol car pulled out of the driveway, Liam dropped the concerned family man act. He smirked, walking over to the dining table where he had stacked the manila folders pulled from my safe. He picked them up, tapping them triumphantly against his hand. You really should learn your place in this city, Kendra. Liam sneered, his voice laced with pure malice. A wealthy developer's word will always crush a bitter single mother's word. Now Serena and I have some very lucrative investments to make with my new niece's money. Serena laughed. Vivian did not look me in the eye. She just followed Liam and Serena out the front door. I stood still, listening as Liam's SUV started up. I waited until the sound of their tires faded into the night. Then I walked to the front door and engaged the heavy deadbolt. I headed straight into my kitchen. I opened my pantry and moved aside a large sack of flour. Getting down on my knees, I pressed my fingers against the edge of a specific wooden floorboard. It popped open, revealing a hidden compartment. I reached inside and pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. I opened it and spread the crisp, original, intact trust fund documents across my kitchen island. Liam truly believed his privilege made him untouchable. But as a forensic accountant, my career was based on understanding how greedy people operated. Good luck trying to cash in those fake tax debt papers, Liam, I whispered to the empty room. The folders they had stolen from my safe contained highly realistic forged documents detailing massive, crippling federal tax liabilities and severe debt obligations that would automatically trigger a brutal audit for anyone attempting to process them. They thought they had won the ultimate prize. In reality, they had just stolen a ticking financial time bomb entirely. The morning sun barely crested the Atlanta skyline when my alarm buzzed at 6 a.m. sharp. I did not sleep a single wink last night. Instead, I spent the dark hours meticulously verifying the security protocols on my child's authentic trust fund accounts and ensuring the forged documents Liam stole were fully armed to trigger a catastrophic federal audit the absolute moment he tried to process them. I walked into her pale pink bedroom and gently brushed a soft curl from her forehead. She was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that her own grandmother and aunt had tried to rob her blind just hours ago. I helped her get dressed, packed her favorite dinosaur lunchbox, and drove her to her private kindergarten. I hugged her extra tightly before watching her skip happily into the colorful classroom. Once she was entirely safe, I headed back to my car to prepare for my own workday. I sat in the driver's seat and took a deep breath, mentally preparing myself to analyze complex corporate ledgers at my downtown office. Just as I turned the ignition key, my cell phone began to vibrate violently against the center console. The caller identification flashed a name I had deeply dreaded seeing. It was my mother. I stared at the glowing screen for a long moment. I knew Vivian rarely called me on a weekday morning unless she wanted to complain about something I was doing wrong or brag about Serena and her latest lavish purchase. Today, however, I knew exactly why she was calling. I pressed the green accept button and lifted the phone to my ear. "Hello, Vivian," I said, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. "Listen to me very carefully, Kendra," my mother snapped. Her voice was utterly devoid of the fake trembling tears she had so convincingly displayed for the police officer last night. Now her tone was pure, unadulterated venom. It was the harsh, calculating voice she only ever used when she was talking down to me behind closed doors. "You made a massive mistake trying to humiliate Liam in front of law enforcement. You are going to fix it today, or I promise you will lose absolutely everything." I gripped the leather steering wheel tightly. "You broke into my house to steal from your own granddaughter. There is nothing left for us to discuss." "Oh, we have plenty to discuss," She laughed, a dry, humorless sound that sent a sharp chill down my spine. Liam spoke with Officer Miller again this morning. He officially filed a formal police report regarding your violent manic episode last night. He documented how you took a crowbar to your own wall, acted incredibly erratically, and created an unsafe environment for a minor. I corroborated his entire statement as a highly concerned grandmother. Do you know what happens when a wealthy, respected white developer and a prominent church choir director report a single black mother for severe mental instability? My heart slammed against my ribs. You would not dare. I will personally call Child Protective Services before noon. Vivian threatened, her words dripping with absolute malice. I will have social workers pull Lily out of her kindergarten class today. They will place her in emergency foster care, and with the official police report stating you are dangerously unhinged, you will never win custody back. I will make sure the family court judge strips away every single one of your parental rights. The sheer magnitude of her wicked betrayal took my breath away. She was weaponizing the deeply biased system against her own flesh and blood, just to protect Liam and his fragile ego and Serena and her bank account. What do you want? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Serena and Liam are hosting their grand anniversary luncheon this afternoon at the exclusive Buckhead Country Club, Vivian commanded. You will put on a decent dress, and you will arrive at exactly 1 in the afternoon. Liam has prepared a simple legal document transferring full financial guardianship of Lily and her trust fund over to him. You will smile, you will sign that paper, and you will apologize to your sister for your embarrassing behavior. If you do exactly as you are told, I will not make the call to Child Protective Services. If you refuse, say goodbye to your daughter forever. She hung up the phone before I could utter a single word in response. The sharp click of the disconnected line echoed loudly inside my silent car. I lowered the phone slowly into my lap. For a brief, fleeting moment, a wave of profound sadness washed over me. This was the woman who had given birth to me. This was the woman who sang hymns about grace and salvation every Sunday morning. Yet, she was entirely willing to destroy my life and traumatize her 5-year-old granddaughter just to maintain her proximity to Liam and his superficial wealth. The sadness vanished almost instantly. It was completely incinerated by a sudden consuming surge of cold, calculated rage. My hands began to tremble, but I was not scared. I was furious. They had vastly underestimated me my entire life, viewing my quiet demeanor as a sign of pathetic weakness. They thought they had backed a helpless, simple-minded accountant into an inescapable corner. They had absolutely no idea they were actively provoking a highly trained forensic investigator who specialized in tearing down massive, corrupt financial empires. I did not drive to my office. I drove straight back to my house. I walked through the front door into my home office. I locked the solid wooden door behind me. I sat down at my expansive glass desk and woke up my custom-built computer terminal. I pulled up the digital dossiers I had compiled on Liam. If they wanted me to attend their luncheon today, I would gladly oblige, but I was definitely going to burn their fake empire straight to the ground. The valet at the Buckhead Country Club reached for my car door before I even shifted into park. I stepped out onto the pristine cobblestone driveway, my heels clicking sharply against the pavement. This place was the pinnacle of Atlanta elite society. It was an overwhelmingly white, heavily gated fortress of old money and deeply entrenched privilege. I wore a tailored charcoal blazer and trousers, projecting the exact image of a compliant, boring accountant they expected to see. Inside the grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers cast a warm, expensive glow over dozens of perfectly manicured guests. A string quartet played softly in the corner, masking the sound of clinking champagne flutes and hollow laughter. I spotted my family immediately. They were holding court near the massive bay windows overlooking the 18th hole. Serena wore a custom silk dress that easily cost more than my first car, laughing brightly at something a state senator's wife had just said. Liam stood beside her, swirling a glass of scotch, loudly boasting to a circle of eager investors about his upcoming mega-development project in downtown Atlanta. I did not even have the chance to fully step into the room before a hand clamped down viciously on my forearm. Vivian pulled me roughly behind a towering floral arrangement, her perfectly painted lips pulled into a tight, furious line. She did not bother asking how my morning was or if my daughter was safe. Instead, she shoved a heavy leather folder aggressively against my chest. "Pay this immediately," my mother hissed, her voice vibrating with barely contained hostility. "It is the final catering bill for the luncheon. $25,000. Do not act surprised. Serena needs to keep all of her capital completely liquid for Liam's big project. You owe this family for putting up with your miserable, ungrateful attitude all these years. You have no husband and no real life, so you can easily absorb the cost." I looked down at the gold-embossed receipt resting against my jacket. My own mother was actively treating me like a walking ATM to fund the very people who were trying to steal my child. I took a slow, deep breath, staring directly into her cold eyes. "I will handle the payment, Vivian." Her eyes widened slightly at my total lack of resistance, but she quickly masked her surprise with a triumphant sneer. She turned on her heel and marched back toward the champagne fountain. I stood alone behind the flowers for exactly 10 seconds before Liam approached. He had abandoned his circle of wealthy investors to deal with me personally. He carried a thick stack of legal documents and a heavy silver fountain pen. His arrogant stride was designed to intimidate, a physical manifestation of his immense societal privilege. He slapped the paperwork down onto a small mahogany cocktail table right in front of me. The bold black letters at the top of the first page read, "Full financial guardianship and asset transfer." He did not look at me like a family member. He looked at me like an annoying insect he was about to crush under his shoe. "Sign it, Kendra," Liam commanded, his voice dropping to a harsh, menacing whisper. "I am not playing games with you today." Liam continued, leaning in close so I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. "You are going to sign every single page, and you are going to hand over full control of Lily's trust fund right now. If you hesitate for even 1 second, I will make that phone call to the family court judge." "Do you really want to test me? Let me explain exactly how this works in the real world. In this town, an Ivy League real estate developer's word will always, unconditionally crush a bitter black single mother's word in a court of law. I have judges in my pocket. I have police officers on my golf team. You have absolutely nothing. Nobody will ever believe your side of the story. Know your place, Kendra, and do exactly what you are told before you lose your daughter forever." The sheer audacity of his threat hung heavily in the air between us. He was leveraging hundreds of years of systemic bias and weaponizing it directly against my 5-year-old child, just to cover his own greedy, corrupt tracks. Serena suddenly appeared beside him, linking her arm through his, and smiling sweetly for the surrounding guests while glaring daggers at me. "Just sign it, Kendra," my sister urged through gritted teeth. "Stop trying to ruin my perfect day. You always want to make everything about you. Give Liam the money so we can all move on with our lives." I looked at my sister, a woman who would gladly sacrifice her own niece to maintain her country club membership. I looked at Liam, a man so blindly confident in his untouchable status that he handed me the instrument of his own destruction. I looked down at the heavy silver fountain pen resting on top of the guardianship transfer papers. The classical music swelled in the background. The low murmur of wealthy guests echoed around the grand ballroom. I slowly reached out my right hand, my fingers wrapped carefully around the cool metal barrel of the pen. I lowered my head, letting my shoulders drop slightly to project the exact image of total crushing defeat they so desperately wanted to see. I let out a long, shaky sigh, staring blankly at the signature line at the bottom of the page. Liam chuckled softly, shifting his weight in victory. Serena let out a massive breath of relief. I hovered the silver tip of the pen directly over the dotted line. Then, I drove the pen straight downward with every ounce of strength I possessed. The sharp metal tip pierced violently through all 50 pages of the legal documents, driving deep into the expensive mahogany wood of the cocktail table with a loud, violent crack. The sharp crack of the silver fountain pen, piercing the mahogany table, shattered the silence of the ballroom. Liam jumped back, his expensive scotch sloshing over the rim of his crystal glass and staining his tailored cuffs. Serena let out a high shriek, taking a sudden step backward, as if the table itself had caught fire. The thick stack of legal documents designed to strip me of my daughter and her financial inheritance were pinned to the ruined furniture. I did not blink. I did not flinch. I released my firm grip on the pen and stood straight, letting my shoulders pull back to their natural height. The illusion of the defeated single mother evaporated instantly into the crisp air conditioning. My mother Vivian stood completely frozen behind her floral arrangement, watching the scene unfold with terrified eyes. She expected me to pay the bill and walk away in shame. Liam stared at the ruined paperwork, his face flushing a deep, angry crimson. He opened his mouth to yell, to threaten me with his corrupt judges and police officers, but I did not give him the chance. I reached smoothly into the inner breast pocket of my charcoal blazer. I retrieved a sleek, heavy black titanium Centurion card. I held it gently between my index and middle fingers, letting the dark metal catch the light of the grand chandeliers overhead. With a quick flick of my wrist, I tossed the elite credit card onto the table right next to the catering bill my mother had violently shoved into my chest moments prior. The solid metal card landed against the wood with a heavy, authoritative thud. Serena stared blankly at the card. Her eyes widened to the absolute size of saucers. She spent her entire superficial existence endlessly obsessing over exclusive status symbols, and she recognized that specific piece of titanium immediately. "How did you get that?" Serena demanded, her voice shrill and trembling with a sudden, unexplainable panic. "You cannot possibly qualify for a card like that. You are just a boring mid-level desk worker." I completely ignored my sister. She was nothing but a noisy distraction, a simple pawn in a much larger, darker game. My eyes remained locked entirely on Liam. I stepped deliberately around the cocktail table, moving so incredibly close to him that I could see the panicked pulse beating rapidly at the base of his neck. He tried to maintain his towering, arrogant posture, attempting to look down his nose at me, but his confident foundation was already severely cracking under the intense pressure. "You should really audit the shell companies you buy commercial land from, Liam," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet conversational tone that only he and Serena could hear over the string quartet playing nearby. "That massive downtown mega development you were just bragging about to those wealthy investors. The exact one that is supposed to cement your entire grand legacy in this city." Liam swallowed hard. He did not speak. He just stared at me, his blue eyes searching my face for any sign that I was bluffing. I was not. "The central lot." I continued, articulating every single word with absolute surgical precision. "The 70-acre parcel right in the very middle of your proposed development. The one you desperately need to secure the city zoning permits. You currently think you are negotiating to buy it from a private holding firm out of Delaware. You think they are just playing hard to get." Liam's hands balled into tight fists at his sides. "What do you know about that property?" he hissed defensively. "I know that the holding firm is called KL Holdings," I whispered softly, leaning in just an inch closer. "And I know exactly who owns it. KL stands for Kendra and Lily. That is me, Liam. I own the absolute dead center of your billion-dollar dream project. I bought it 3 years ago when the city quietly floated the redevelopment plans. And as of this exact second, the asking price just went up to $20 million. The color instantly drained from Liam's arrogant face. His smug, impenetrable facade completely shattered, leaving behind a pale, terrified man who suddenly realized he had brought a butter knife to a nuclear war. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the chest. I was not a low-level accountant desperately clinging to a boring job. I was a fiercely intelligent financial predator, and I held the key to his entire professional empire securely in the palm of my hand. If he did not get that land, his investors would pull out. His loans would default. He would be ruined. "You are lying," Liam choked out, though the sheer terror radiating from his voice confirmed he knew I was telling the absolute truth. "Check the public county tax records." I smiled coldly, stepping back from his personal space. "My lawyers filed the corporate ownership disclosures this morning. Have a beautiful anniversary, Liam. Enjoy the catering. It is entirely on me." I turned my back on them and walked gracefully away. The heavy mahogany doors of the grand ballroom loomed ahead. I pushed them open and stepped out into the bright, warm Georgia sunlight. Behind me, the string quartet continued to play their elegant classical tunes, completely ignorant to the massive financial earthquake that had just occurred in the corner of the room. Back inside the country club, Liam stared at my black card resting on the table. His hands shook violently. He pulled his cell phone from his pocket, his fingers fumbling over the screen. He dialed a highly restricted number, pressing the phone aggressively against his ear. His entire future was currently disintegrating, and his fragile ego could not handle being bested by a black woman he had openly despised. The line connected. "I do not care what it takes," Liam snarled into the receiver, his voice shaking with absolute unhinged rage. "Destroy her career by Monday morning." The morning sun barely crested the Atlanta skyline when my alarm buzzed at 6 sharp. I did not sleep a single wink. Instead, I spent the dark hours meticulously verifying the security protocols on my child's authentic trust fund accounts and ensuring the forged documents Liam stole were fully armed to trigger a catastrophic federal audit the absolute moment he tried to process them. I walked into her pale pink bedroom and brushed a soft curl from her forehead. She was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that her grandmother and aunt had tried to rob her blind just hours ago. I helped her get dressed, packed her favorite dinosaur lunchbox, and drove her to her private kindergarten. I hugged her tightly before watching her skip happily into the colorful classroom. Once she was entirely safe, I headed back to my car to prepare for my own workday. I sat in the driver's seat and took a deep breath, mentally preparing myself to analyze complex corporate ledgers at my downtown office. Just as I turned the ignition key, my cell phone began to vibrate violently against the center console. The caller identification flashed a name I had dreaded seeing. It was my mother. I stared at the glowing screen for a long moment. I knew Vivian rarely called me on a weekday morning, unless she wanted to complain about something I was doing wrong or brag about Serena and her latest lavish purchase. Today I knew exactly why she was calling. I pressed the green accept button and lifted the phone to my ear. "Hello, Vivian," I said, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. "Listen to me very carefully, Kendra," my mother snapped. Her voice was utterly devoid of the fake trembling tears she had so convincingly displayed for the police officer last night. Now her tone was pure, unadulterated venom. It was the harsh, calculating voice she only ever used when she was talking down to me behind closed doors. "You made a massive mistake trying to humiliate Liam in front of law enforcement. You are going to fix it today, or I promise you will lose absolutely everything." I gripped the leather steering wheel tightly. "You broke into my house to steal from your own granddaughter. There is nothing left for us to discuss." "Oh, we have plenty to discuss." She laughed, a dry, humorless sound that sent a sharp chill down my spine. "Liam spoke with Officer Miller again this morning. He officially filed a formal police report regarding your violent manic episode last night. He documented how you took a crowbar to your own wall, acted incredibly erratically, and created an unsafe environment for a minor." I corroborated his entire statement as a highly concerned grandmother. "Do you know what happens when a wealthy, respected white developer and a prominent church choir director report a single black mother for severe mental instability?" My heart slammed against my ribs. "You would not dare. I will personally call Child Protective Services before noon." Vivian threatened, her words dripping with absolute malice. "I will have social workers pull Lily out of her kindergarten class today. They will place her in emergency foster care, and with the official police report stating you are dangerously unhinged, you will never win custody back. I will make sure the family court judge strips away every single one of your parental rights." The sheer magnitude of her wicked betrayal took my breath away. She was weaponizing the deeply biased system against her own flesh and blood just to protect Liam and his fragile ego and Serena and her bank account. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Serena and Liam are hosting their grand anniversary luncheon this afternoon at the exclusive Buckhead Country Club," Vivian commanded. "You will put on a decent dress, and you will arrive at exactly 1 in the afternoon. Liam has prepared a simple legal document transferring full financial guardianship of Lily and her trust fund over to him. You will smile, you will sign that paper, and you will apologize to your sister for your embarrassing behavior. If you do exactly as you are told, I will not make the call to Child Protective Services. If you refuse, say goodbye to your daughter forever. She hung up the phone before I could utter a single word in response. The sharp click of the disconnected line echoed loudly inside my silent car. I lowered the phone slowly into my lap. For a brief fleeting moment, a wave of profound sadness washed over me. This was the woman who had given birth to me. This was the woman who sang hymns about grace and salvation every Sunday morning. Yet, she was entirely willing to destroy my life and traumatize her 5-year-old granddaughter just to maintain her proximity to Liam and his superficial wealth. The sadness vanished almost instantly. It was completely incinerated by a sudden consuming surge of cold, calculated rage. My hands began to tremble, but I was not scared. I was furious. They had vastly underestimated me my entire life, viewing my quiet demeanor as a sign of pathetic weakness. They thought they had backed a helpless accountant into an inescapable corner. They had absolutely no idea they were provoking a highly trained forensic investigator who specialized in tearing down massive corrupt financial empires. I did not drive to my downtown corporate office. I drove straight back to my house, ignoring every single speed limit sign along the busy morning road. I walked through the front door into my home office. I locked the solid wooden door behind me. I sat down at my expansive glass desk and woke up my custom-built computer terminal. I pulled up the digital dossiers I had compiled on Liam. If they wanted me to attend their luncheon today, I would gladly oblige. But I was definitely going to burn their fake empire straight to the ground. The smart blinds slammed down over the glass walls of the chief executive officer's office, plunging the room into artificial twilight. I stood perfectly still near the door, holding the remote control in my hand. The smug smiles plastered across the faces of my mother, my sister Serena, and Liam vanished instantly. The chief executive officer, an older white man who played golf with Liam's father for decades, stood up from his leather chair. "What exactly do you think you are doing, Kendra?" he demanded, his voice echoing loudly. "I just fired you. Open those blinds and let security escort you out." I ignored the cardboard termination box he slid across his desk. I did not shed a tear or beg for my boring accounting job. Instead, I walked deliberately past my family, who were sitting rigidly on the plush leather sofas. I moved directly to the center of the executive conference table, pulled a highly encrypted titanium flash drive from my blazer pocket, and plugged it smoothly into the main presentation console. I tapped a single button on the glass touchscreen. The massive digital projector mounted on the ceiling hummed to life, casting a bright, harsh rectangular glow against the blank white wall behind the executive desk. "You have all made a catastrophic miscalculation today," I said, my voice cutting through the silent room like a razor blade. I turned to look directly at Liam. "You truly believed you could use your societal privilege and your country club connections to crush a single black mother. You assumed I was just a mid-level number cruncher who would quietly pack her desk and cry in her car." Serena scoffed loudly, crossing her arms defensively. "You are just an accountant, Kendra," my sister sneered, though her voice shook with a sudden, unexplainable panic. "Stop being so incredibly dramatic and accept your failure. Liam made one phone call and destroyed your entire pathetic career." I tapped the presentation remote, and a highly classified federal credential flashed onto the massive screen. "I am not a standard accountant," I stated clearly, watching the blood slowly drain from Liam's arrogant face. "I am a senior forensic financial investigator. I specialize in tearing down complex corporate fraud and tracking deeply hidden offshore assets. I work directly as an independent contractor alongside federal law enforcement agencies to dismantle massive financial crimes." My mother, Vivian, clutched her expensive pearl necklace, her eyes darting nervously between the glowing projector screen and my face. "What kind of nonsense is this?" she whispered frantically. "You do taxes." "I trace dark money," I corrected her sharply. I clicked the remote again. A complex organizational chart appeared on the wall, detailing a labyrinth of proxy corporations and blind trusts. I pointed a laser pointer at the very top tier of the corporate hierarchy. When I started working at this elite auditing firm 5 years ago, I noticed severe irregularities in the corporate structure. So I began quietly buying out retiring partners through an anonymous proxy firm. I do not just work here. I am the silent majority shareholder. I personally own 40% of this entire company. The chief executive officer dropped heavily back into his leather chair. His mouth fell open in pure, unadulterated horror. He stared at the legal documents projected onto his own office wall, realizing instantly that the woman he had just tried to wrongfully terminate was actually his most powerful corporate partner. Liam shifted uncomfortably on the leather couch, trying to maintain his tough facade, but the heavy sweat beading on his forehead betrayed his escalating terror. "You cannot possibly own this firm," Liam choked out, though he lacked any real conviction. "I own enough of it to audit your dirty accounts," I replied coldly. I clicked the remote for the third time. The screen filled with highlighted bank statements, offshore routing numbers, and encrypted wire transfers. "Let us talk about why you wanted me fired so badly, Liam. You convinced your old family friend here to terminate me because I was getting too close to your fake real estate empire, but you were far too late." I turned my fierce gaze to the trembling chief executive officer. "You have been accepting massive illegal financial kickbacks from Liam's real estate firm for the past 3 years. In exchange for millions of dollars deposited into your hidden accounts in the Cayman Islands, you have been officially signing off on completely fraudulent financial health reports for Liam's company, hiding his massive debts from his investors." The executive grabbed his chest, breathing heavily as he stared at the undeniable proof of his federal crimes projected in bright light. I walked directly up to his desk and leaned over the polished wood. "You are not firing me today," I told him, articulating every syllable with lethal precision. "You are resigning from this firm immediately, and you are relinquishing all of your remaining shares. Or I swear to you, this entire dossier goes directly to the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service in exactly 60 seconds. The room erupted into total chaos. The chief executive officer leaped from his chair, his face purple with absolute rage and terror. He turned aggressively on Liam, pointing a shaking finger at him. "Get out of my office!" he screamed at the top of his lungs. "You brought a federal investigator into my business. You arrogant, stupid fool. You have ruined everything. Get out!" Liam stumbled backward, completely humiliated and terrified, realizing his entire web of corruption had just been utterly dismantled in mere minutes. Vivian sat paralyzed on the couch, unable to comprehend that the wealthy son-in-law she worshipped was actually a desperate criminal. But Serena did not retreat. Humiliated and pushed to the edge, my sister leaped up, her face twisted into a mask of hatred. She charged at me, fists clenched. "You think you won," Serena hissed violently. "I will make sure you never see your daughter again." I did not even flinch as Serena lunged forward. I simply stepped neatly to the left, allowing her own reckless momentum to carry her past me. She stumbled awkwardly in her expensive designer heels and crashed against the heavy glass door. Before she could regain her balance, the two corporate security guards I had stationed in the outer hallway pushed the door open. They grabbed Serena by her upper arms, ignoring her shrill screams. Liam tried to intervene, puffing up his chest and shouting legal threats, but the guards shoved him backward into the corridor. The former chief executive officer was frantically throwing his personal items into a cardboard box. His hands shaking so violently, he dropped his gold fountain pen twice. I stood in the center of the executive office, adjusting the lapels of my charcoal blazer, feeling a surge of absolute victory. I had successfully dismantled their corrupt financial power structure in less than 15 minutes. The massive corporate beast that Liam relied on to fund his fraudulent lifestyle was now under my control. I walked over to the massive mahogany desk, sat down in the plush leather chair, and exhaled a satisfying breath. I had won. Or at least I genuinely thought I had won. I watched the digital clock on the wall tick forward, relishing the profound silence that replaced the usual chaotic family demands. This was the exact moment of professional triumph I had planned for over 3 years. My personal cell phone suddenly vibrated sharply against the thick glass desktop. The caller identification flashed the name of the private kindergarten where I had dropped Lily off just a few hours ago. A strange, icy prickle of unease washed over the back of my neck. The school administration never called my personal line during the day unless it was a strict medical emergency. I snatched the phone and pressed it tightly to my ear. "This is Kendra," I answered quickly, my voice steady. "Ms. Davis, thank goodness, I reached you," the kindergarten teacher said. Her voice was trembling uncontrollably, bordering on pure panic. "You need to come to the school right now. There are police officers here and they brought representatives from Child Protective Services." My blood instantly ran cold. The satisfying warmth of my corporate victory evaporated, replaced by a suffocating, paralyzing terror. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, standing up so fast, my chair rolled backward and hit the wall loudly. "They have an emergency court order," the teacher cried softly over the phone. "They are stating you are in immediate danger to your child. They are demanding we release Lily into their custody right now. Please hurry." I could hear the faint, muffled sound of children crying in the background of the call. The teacher sounded completely terrified of the aggressive law enforcement presence demanding access to her classroom. I told her I was on my way and hung up the phone. I dropped the phone into my pocket. I did not bother grabbing my briefcase or presentation materials. I sprinted out of the executive office, shoved past a group of startled accountants, and bolted straight for the private elevator. My mind raced at 1,000,000 miles an hour, piecing together the horrifying timeline of events. The vicious threat Serena made moments ago was not an empty boast. Liam had already executed his backup plan. He used his vast wealth, country club connections, and golf buddies in the judicial system to bypass standard legal protocols completely. He called in a massive favor from a corrupt family court judge to secure an emergency order. They weaponized my fabricated mental breakdown from last night, backed heavily by the false testimony of my mother, to legally kidnap my daughter. I slammed my hand against the steering wheel of my car as I sped out of the parking garage. I merged aggressively onto the busy Atlanta streets, ignoring the furious honking of other drivers. I ran 3 consecutive red lights, my foot pressing the gas pedal entirely to the floor. My heart pounded relentlessly against my chest as I navigated the heavy midday traffic, praying I would not be too late. The systemic injustice of the situation burned in my throat. Liam knew exactly how to manipulate the biased family court system against a black mother. He was treating my child like a pawn in his twisted financial game. I careened into the school parking lot, tires screeching against the hot asphalt. I threw the vehicle into park and ripped the door open. The sight before me made my heart stop completely. 2 white police cruisers were parked near the colorful playground entrance, their lights flashing aggressively. A stern social worker in a gray suit held official paperwork in one hand. In her other hand, she was holding the tiny, trembling arm of my 5-year-old daughter. Lily was crying hysterically, her small face, red and streaked with tears, clutching her dinosaur lunchbox against her chest. "Mommy," Lily screamed, her voice cracking as she saw me running across grass. I sprinted toward her, desperate to rip her away from the state workers. But 2 large police officers immediately stepped into my path, blocking me firmly with their bodies. "Step back, ma'am," the taller officer commanded, resting his hand casually on his utility belt. "We have a lawful order signed by a superior court judge. You no longer have physical custody of this child." I struggled against the officers, screaming for my daughter, but they held me back with brutal force. The social worker gently but firmly guided a sobbing Lily into the back of an unmarked state vehicle and slammed the heavy door shut. That was when I saw her. Standing just a few feet away, safely behind the police barricade, was my sister. Serena was wearing a pristine white sundress, her arms crossed lazily over her chest. She looked directly into my panicked, devastated eyes. Serena smiled, a wicked, triumphant, incredibly evil smile. I stood completely paralyzed behind the line of stoic police officers, watching the state vehicle carry my only child away into the hazy afternoon traffic. Serena stood on the manicured grass of the kindergarten lawn, offering me a wicked, triumphant smile that chilled me to my very core. She raised her hand and gave a small mocking wave before turning on her expensive designer heels and strutting toward her luxury sports utility vehicle. Every maternal instinct in my body screamed at me to fight to break through the barricade of heavy blue uniforms and tear the doors off that government car. But my forensic training, the cold and calculating part of my brain, violently hit the brakes. If I assaulted a police officer right now, I would give Liam exactly what he needed to permanently terminate my parental rights. I forced myself to step back. I lowered my trembling hands, turned around, and walked stiffly to my car. I did not cry in the parking lot. I drove back to my house in total, completely suffocating silence. The absolute moment. I closed my front door and turned the deadbolt. My iron facade shattered completely. I collapsed right there in the front hallway. The profound silence of my home was deafening. There were no cartoons playing on the television. There were no small footsteps running across the hardwood floors. Lily's colorful dinosaur backpack sat abandoned on the entryway bench, a brutal reminder of the violent kidnapping disguised as a lawful court order. I simply pulled my knees to my chest and sobbed until my throat burned and my vision blurred. I cried for my terrified daughter, who was sitting in a strange foster home, wondering why her mother had not saved her. I cried for the devastating betrayal of my own flesh and blood. My mother and sister had actively conspired to rip my child away simply because I refused to fund their lavish, fraudulent lifestyle. I was drowning in a heavy sea of absolute misery. The crushing grief did not last long. It slowly morphed into a lethal, laser-focused rage that burned hotter than 1,000 suns. I wiped the tears from my face and stood up. Playing by the standard rules would never work against Liam. He had systemic privilege, endless financial resources, and a corrupt network of powerful allies who would always protect him. My family had masterfully manipulated the biased family court system, banking entirely on the racist stereotype of the unstable, angry black woman to discredit me. If I hired a traditional lawyer and filed a standard appeal, Lily would be trapped in the system for months. Liam would use that time to drain her $15 million trust fund dry. I could not fight him in a courtroom. I had to destroy the very foundation of his entire existence. I had to dismantle his financial empire piece by microscopic piece. I needed to annihilate his reputation. I walked straight into my home office and securely locked the heavy wooden door. I closed the window blinds tightly and turned on the overhead fluorescent lights. I activated my military-grade financial tracking software, typing and complex command overrides that bypassed standard banking firewalls. The 3 massive monitors on my desk flared to life, displaying endless streams of green and white data algorithms. I pulled up the public tax records, business licenses, and property deeds for every single corporation tied to Liam, Serena, and Vivian. I ordered my system to scrape the dark web for any hidden offshore holding companies registered under their names or known associates. I was going completely dark. I would not eat, I would not sleep, and I would not stop until I found the exact thread that would unravel their entire lives and bring my baby back home to me. The next 48 hours blurred into a relentless, grueling marathon of digital excavation, empty coffee cups piled up on the edge of my glass desk. My eyes burned from staring intensely at the glowing screens, but my fingers never stopped flying across the mechanical keyboard. I traced every single penny Liam had ever borrowed, spent, or transferred. I scrutinized Serena's absurd credit card statements and audited my mother's church choir expense reports with ruthless precision. I dug through endless layers of fake shell companies registered in Delaware and Nevada, peeling back the thick corporate veils that shielded Liam's real estate mega-developments. I mapped out his entire professional network, identifying his primary investors, his aggressive lenders, and the corrupt local politicians he regularly bribed to expedite his building permits. The deeper I went into his personal accounts, the more twisted his financial web became. How was moving astronomical amounts of capital through heavily disguised channels that made absolutely no logical business sense. It was a chaotic maze designed to confuse standard auditors, but I was not standard. At exactly 3 in the morning. On the second night of my deep dive, a high-pitched alert chimed loudly from my left monitor. The federal tracking software had finally broken through a heavily encrypted banking firewall that Liam had paid top dollar to secure. A massive hidden offshore account located in the Cayman Islands flagged a catastrophic financial anomaly. The numbers rolling rapidly across my screen were absolutely staggering, and they did not match a single legitimate real estate transaction in Liam's public portfolio. The money was flowing backward, creating a massive vacuum of unauthorized debt that he was desperately trying to conceal from his primary investors. The entire foundation of his prestigious empire was built on a monumental lie. I leaned intimately close to the glowing monitor, my eyes narrowing at the devastating truth hidden within the digital ledger. I smiled a dark, dangerous smile in the empty room. "What are you hiding, Liam?" I dragged my fingertips across the smooth glass of my desk, my eyes tracking the endless cascade of encrypted bank transfers glowing brightly on the center monitor. The hidden Cayman Islands account was not just a simple offshore tax haven designed to shield legitimate corporate wealth. It was a desperate, rapidly bleeding financial artery. Liam had meticulously set up a complex, interwoven web of phantom limited liability companies to silently funnel capital away from his primary business accounts, but he was not hiding vast profits. He was actively hemorrhaging cash at an unprecedented catastrophic rate. I immediately initiated a deep packet inspection protocol, forcing my military-grade forensic software to forcefully decrypt the heavily layered transactional data. The raw numbers materialized quickly on my screen, painting a horrifying, undeniable picture of absolute financial ruin. Liam was not a highly successful visionary real estate mogul. He was a complete desperate fraud running a massive, rapidly crumbling Ponzi scheme right in the very heart of Atlanta. Every single luxury commercial development project he had arrogantly bragged about at the country club was nothing but a hollow fabricated shell. He had been aggressively soliciting millions of dollars from wealthy, unsuspecting investors to fund his glamorous downtown megaproject. However, not a single penny of that acquired capital was actually going toward legitimate construction permits, architectural designs, or raw building materials. Instead, Liam was frantically using the massive influx of new investment money to quickly pay off his older, increasingly angry investors. He was blatantly robbing Peter to pay Paul, and the entire fragile house of cards was finally collapsing violently under its own massive weight. The prestigious, highly respected Ivy League developer was completely drowning in a highly toxic sea of fraudulent debts, and his lavish, untouchable lifestyle was entirely funded by stolen money. I cross-referenced the massive outgoing wire transfers with known high-risk financial institutions stored in my federal database. The shocking results made my blood run absolutely cold. Liam did not just owe money to arrogant country club elites and gullible state senators. He was massively indebted to a highly violent, unforgiving criminal syndicate operating directly out of Miami. The decrypted digital ledger showed repeatedly missed penalty payments, incredibly exorbitant interest rates, and highly aggressive capital demands that no legitimate bank would ever issue. They were bleeding him entirely dry. Suddenly, the violent urgency of the afternoon made perfect, terrifying sense. Liam was not trying to steal Lily's $15 million trust fund to build a beautiful new skyscraper. He desperately needed my daughter's massive inheritance to pay off a ruthless cartel before heavily armed enforcers showed up at his pristine suburban mansion to brutally collect his life. I was actively treating my sweet 5-year-old child as a highly convenient human shield to save his own pathetic, worthless skin. A new ferocious wave of lethal anger propelled my fingers rapidly across the mechanical keyboard. I needed to understand exactly how he was moving the dirty cartel money back into the legitimate United States banking system without triggering a massive federal audit. Criminals of his magnitude always needed a highly reliable money mule to carefully wash the illicit funds before they could be spent on luxury cars and expensive country club memberships. I activated a complex reverse tracking algorithm, isolating the seemingly clean money entering his primary domestic accounts. The powerful software hummed loudly in the quiet room, rapidly processing thousands of localized transactions. A bright red line traced swiftly across the digital map of Atlanta, connecting Liam's corporate bank directly to a highly recognizable local institution. I stared intensely at the glowing screen, my breath completely catching in my throat. The sophisticated money laundering pipeline did not route through a shady underground casino or a corrupt offshore banking conglomerate. The massive influx of washed capital was flowing directly out of the First Zion megachurch. It was the exact same prominent, highly respected congregation where my family worshipped loudly every single Sunday morning. I typed furiously, drilling down aggressively into the specific departmental ledgers of the church's massive financial network. The forensic system quickly bypassed the main tithing accounts and locked onto a heavily padded, highly secretive secondary fund. It was the exclusive Gospel Choir Fund. I stared in pure, unadulterated horror at the authorized signatory listed at the very bottom of the fraudulent digital ledger. The verified digital signature belonged exclusively to the head choir director. My own mother, Vivian, was the primary money mule for a violent criminal syndicate. The sheer magnitude of this wicked betrayal hit me like a devastating physical blow to the chest. Vivian had spent my entire life loudly preaching about moral superiority and religious grace, constantly judging me for being a single mother. Yet she was actively utilizing her highly respected position within the Holy Church to funnel millions of dollars of dirty cartel money straight into Liam's fraudulent pockets. She was intentionally washing the very funds that were fueling the systemic destruction of my life and the violent kidnapping of my innocent daughter. Serena's lavish designer dresses and Vivian's pristine social standing were entirely subsidized by an incredibly dangerous criminal enterprise. They had all willingly sold their souls to maintain the pathetic illusion of high society wealth. My hands balled into tight, angry fists on top of my glass desk. They had aggressively weaponized the deeply flawed justice system to steal Lily away from me, believing their fabricated prestige would protect them from any real consequences. They genuinely thought they had won the ultimate war today. I leaned intimately close to the glowing monitor, my eyes narrowing at the devastating truth perfectly hidden within the digital ledger. The sheer audacity of their twisted, corrupted lives fueled a brand new fire deep inside my chest. They possessed absolutely no idea who they were truly dealing with tonight. I was going to tear them apart. I smiled a dark, incredibly dangerous smile in the empty room. "What are you hiding, Liam?" I grabbed my keys and walked straight out the front door into the cool night air. I did not bother changing my clothes. The digital clock on my dashboard glared bright red, indicating it was barely past 8 in the evening. Thursday night meant only one thing at the First Zion megachurch. It was the weekly grand choir rehearsal. I drove recklessly through the illuminated Atlanta streets, my grip on the leather steering wheel tight enough to turn my knuckles completely white. My mind processed the devastating financial data I had just uncovered, aligning every fraudulent transaction with my mother's sudden rise in the church's social hierarchy. She had deliberately traded my daughter's ultimate safety for a prestigious front-row seat among the incredibly wealthy congregation. I pulled aggressively into the massive, brightly lit church parking lot. I ignored the designated parking spaces entirely and left my vehicle idling in front of the main sanctuary doors. I marched up the sweeping concrete steps and pushed the heavy oak doors open with a violent, echoing shove. The sweeping acoustics of the grand sanctuary amplified the majestic voices of the 50-person choir standing on the stage. Vivian stood proudly at the center, waving her arms gracefully as she directed the powerful, uplifting hymn. She wore a pristine white suit, looking like the absolute picture of divine grace and unshakable moral superiority. I walked briskly down the long center aisle, my shoes clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. Several choir members stopped singing abruptly as they noticed my aggressive approach. Vivian lowered her hands slowly, her perfect artificial smile faltering the exact moment she made direct eye contact with me. She stepped down quickly from the elevated stage, rushing forward to intercept me before I could reach the holy altar. She grabbed my elbow forcefully, trying to maintain her pleasant, welcoming facade for the watching, whispering congregation. "What on earth are you doing here in the middle of my rehearsal?" she hissed viciously under her breath. I yanked my arm violently away from her controlling grip. "We are going to the rectory right now," I demanded loudly, "or I will hand these highly incriminating financial documents to the police officer parked just outside." Vivian paled instantly, her eyes darting nervously toward the heavy wooden doors. She turned back to her confused choir, offering a fake, highly exaggerated smile, and instructed them to take a brief intermission. She quickly ushered me down a long, dimly lit, carpeted hallway and shoved me forcefully into a private, soundproof rectory room used primarily for confidential financial meetings. She locked the heavy wooden door securely behind us and spun around, her eyes flashing with pure, venomous anger. "Have you completely lost your mind?" she yelled, dropping her holy righteous act entirely. "You cannot just storm into the house of God like a maniac and threaten me in front of my peers." I did not raise my voice or show a single ounce of fear. I simply reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the thick stack of freshly printed wire transfer logs. I threw the heavy stack of papers aggressively onto the polished conference table. They fanned out perfectly across the dark wood, displaying every single illicit transaction, hidden offshore routing number, and complex money laundering pipeline connecting Liam's fraudulent real estate empire directly to her exclusive choir fund. "You are actively running dirty, dangerous cartel money straight through the church, Vivian," I stated coldly. "You are intentionally washing heavily stolen funds to heavily subsidize Serena's lavish, arrogant lifestyle." My mother stared down in horror at the brightly highlighted bank statements. The warm color completely drained from her face, leaving her looking suddenly haggard, old, and undeniably terrified. She did not even attempt to deny the overwhelming evidence sitting right in front of her. She slowly sank into a plush leather chair, rubbing her trembling temples with her perfectly manicured fingernails. "You do not understand how things actually work in the real world, Kendra," she sneered defensively, refusing to show any genuine remorse. Liam desperately needed a highly secure, unquestionable way to move his massive capital around the city. I simply provided a deeply valuable service. In exchange for my help, he substantially elevated this entire family's standing in the community. I stepped forward, slamming my hands aggressively onto the wooden table. "He is a ruthless, desperate criminal," I shouted, the fury finally breaking through my controlled exterior. "He is actively stealing money from your own granddaughter to cover his pathetic, miserable tracks." Vivian stood up abruptly, her face twisting into a dark, ugly mask of pure resentment. "Serena married exceptionally well." She spat out, her true, terribly toxic colors finally showing. "She gave me highly respected prestige. She gave me a powerful status you could never possibly achieve in your entire miserable life. You just gave me a fatherless child and a massive mountain of constant, yielding embarrassment." The sheer cruelty of her vicious words hung incredibly heavily in the dead silent room. I stared at her, feeling absolutely nothing but cold, clinical, and profound disgust. "Liam's fake Ponzi scheme is rapidly collapsing, Vivian," I told her, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "The federal government is going to seize absolutely everything you own, and you will go straight to federal prison for high-level money laundering." Panic finally shattered her arrogant, untouchable facade completely. Vivian lunged forward and grabbed my arms, her nails digging painfully deep into my skin. "You do not understand the extreme danger we are in," she cried frantically, genuine, unadulterated terror replacing her previous anger. "Liam owes $10 million to a brutally violent Miami cartel. If he does not pay them the entire sum of money by tomorrow night, they promise they will brutally kill Serena. He is going to legally drain Lily's trust fund tomorrow morning to pay off the massive debt and save his own skin. You absolutely have to let him do it." I stared at Vivian, weeping on the plush carpet. My mother admitted she knew a cartel was threatening our family, yet chose to protect her fraudulent son-in-law over her granddaughter. I felt no pity. I turned my back on her without another word. I walked out the heavy doors, leaving her alone with her choices. The cool night air hit my face as I marched toward my vehicle. Liam was cornered. The financial web I uncovered was suffocating him. He owed $10 million to ruthless people by tomorrow night. He was acting out of survival instinct, making him infinitely more dangerous. I climbed into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel. My daughter was trapped in a corrupt system, and the man pulling the strings was desperate. My cell phone illuminated the dark interior of my vehicle. The screen displayed an incoming video request. The caller identification flashed Liam's name. A cold knot formed instantly in the pit of my stomach. I took a steadying breath, forcefully shoving every maternal emotion into a locked box in the back of my mind. I pressed the accept button and raised the phone. The high-definition video connected smoothly. Liam was standing in the marble-lined foyer of his fortified suburban mansion. He looked absolutely dreadful. His usually immaculate blonde hair was disheveled, and his expensive designer shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. Thick bags hung heavily under his bloodshot eyes. He offered the camera a sick, twisted smile. "Good evening, Kendra," Liam said, his voice echoing slightly in his empty house. "I hear you had a very busy afternoon getting yourself fired and causing a massive scene at your daughter's school." I did not respond. I stared at him with an expression of unyielding ice. Liam sighed dramatically. "I thought you might want to see that the state foster system is treating your child very well," he continued. He rotated his phone camera away from his face. The lens panned across his lavish living room and focused on a distant corner. My heart stopped. Sitting on a massive white leather sofa was my precious little girl. Lily was clutching her dinosaur lunchbox tightly against her chest. She looked incredibly small, confused, and deeply scared. Liam had used his corrupt family court judge to bypass the foster system entirely and place Lily directly into his own emergency custody. "Mommy," Lily cried softly toward the phone camera, her tiny voice breaking my heart. I wanted to reach through the digital screen and tear Liam apart. "I am right here, baby," I said, keeping my tone perfectly even so she would not panic. "Mommy is going to see you very soon. Be a brave girl for me." Liam turned the camera back to his own smug, sweating face. He walked into his private study and closed the heavy oak doors, ensuring Serena and Lily could not hear his next words. His face hardened into a mask of pure malice. "Let us stop playing these stupid games, Kendra," Liam hissed, leaning close to the camera lens. "You think you can intimidate me, but I hold the ultimate trump card, and we know it." I stared directly into his panicked blue eyes. "You owe $10 million to a Miami cartel, Liam. They will kill you." He flinched, visibly shocked that I had uncovered the exact details of his criminal debt. He swallowed hard, masking his fear with aggressive arrogance. "That is exactly why you are going to help me," Liam demanded. "Tomorrow at exactly noon, you are going to walk through my front gates. You are going to sign the complete trust fund transfer over to me. You will hand me full legal control of Lily's inheritance. The second the funds clear my offshore accounts, I will call the judge and have the Child Protective Services case dropped permanently. And if I refuse to sign away my child's future?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Liam smiled, exposing his teeth like a starving wolf. "If you do not sign those papers by noon tomorrow, I will make a simple phone call to Miami. I will let the cartel know I am completely broke. But I will also inform them that my foster daughter currently has $15 million sitting in a highly accessible account. Do you really want to risk those violent men coming after a 5-year-old girl to collect my debts? They only care about the money." He was actively utilizing my innocent child as a human shield to protect himself from a brutal criminal syndicate. I sat in the suffocating silence of my car, staring at the monster on my phone screen. He fully expected me to beg. He expected me to cry and plead for mercy. I did not give him a single drop of satisfaction. I forced my facial features into an unreadable, impenetrable mask of solid stone. I looked right through the digital lens, past his arrogant posturing, and directly into his desperate, terrified soul. "Okay, Liam," I said, my voice completely devoid of any human emotion. "You win. I will bring the signed transfer papers to your house tomorrow at noon." Liam let out a shuddering breath of relief. His tense shoulders dropped immediately. He genuinely believed he had successfully broken me. "Good choice, Kendra. See you at noon," he replied smugly, terminating the video connection. The screen went black. I sat in the darkness for 10 seconds. He had just handed me the final piece of the puzzle I needed to annihilate him. I picked up my phone again. I bypassed my standard contacts and dialed a heavily encrypted satellite number. It belonged to a private security extraction team consisting of former federal agents I had once saved from a malicious prosecution. I need a tactical extraction at a fortified residential compound tomorrow at noon, I stated coldly into the receiver. And I need a direct encrypted line to the FBI. The morning sun glared off the polished hood of my vehicle as I pulled up to the imposing wrought iron gates of Liam's suburban fortress. The sprawling estate was surrounded by high brick walls and dozens of visible security cameras. I stared blankly at the intercom speaker. The heavy gates slowly groaned open before I even had the chance to press the buzzer. Liam was clearly watching the perimeter feeds with desperate anticipation. I drove up the winding driveway and parked my car right in front of the massive oak double doors. I checked the digital clock on my dashboard. It was exactly 5 minutes before noon. I picked up the thick leather folder containing Lily's complete trust fund transfer documents. I took one final deep breath to clear my mind. There was absolutely no room for error today. I stepped out of the car and walked up the stone steps. Before I could even reach the brass knocker, the front door was yanked open. Serena stood in the entryway looking incredibly unkempt. Her normally flawless hair was pulled into a messy knot, and she was frantically pacing across the marble foyer in her bare feet. Liam stood right behind her, his face pale and completely drenched in cold sweat. He had not slept at all. The crushing weight of his $10 million cartel debt was clearly suffocating him. He aggressively gestured for me to come inside, locking the heavy deadbolt with a loud snap, the absolute second I crossed the threshold. "Do you have the paperwork?" Liam demanded, his voice cracking slightly as he reached out a shaking hand. "I have everything right here," I replied, holding the leather folder firmly. "Where is my daughter?" Serena stopped pacing and glared at me. "She is upstairs playing in the guest bedroom," she snapped irritably. "We locked the door so she would not wander around. Now give Liam the damn papers so we can finally be done with this nightmare." I did not hand him the folder. Instead, I walked deliberately past them and headed straight into their formal dining room. I dropped the heavy stack of legal documents onto the long mahogany table and pulled out a chair. I sat down slowly, crossing my legs with total precision. Liam followed me immediately, pulling a silver pen from his pocket and slamming it onto the wood. "Sign them," he ordered, his eyes darting frantically toward the grandfather clock ticking loudly in the corner. "You need to sign every single page right now. I have a major wire transfer scheduled with my offshore bank, and I cannot miss the cutoff window." I picked up the silver pen, rolling it casually between my fingers. I knew exactly what was happening outside the walls of this house. While I sat here playing the defeated mother, a specialized, heavily armed extraction team of former federal agents was quietly scaling the rear perimeter of the estate. They were moving invisibly through the dense tree line behind Liam's property, bypassing his expensive civilian security system. I just needed to buy them exactly 12 minutes to breach the second-floor window and safely extract my daughter. I opened the thick folder and slowly turned to the very first page. I did not sign it. I frowned, leaning forward to examine the fine print. "This specific clause regarding the capital gains tax liability seems highly irregular, Liam," I said, keeping my tone perfectly conversational. "It states the primary beneficiary assumes all previous tax burdens associated with the holding company. If I sign this, I am legally exposing Lily to millions in federal tax penalties." Liam slammed his hands down on the dining table, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. "I am not paying you to audit the contract, Kendra. The clause is standard legal boilerplate. Nobody is going to penalize a 5-year-old girl. Stop wasting my time and sign the document." I ignored his outburst completely. I turned to the second page, deliberately reading every single paragraph at an agonizingly slow pace. "And this section here," I continued, pointing the silver pen at a dense block of text. "You listed the offshore routing destination as a generic blind trust in the Cayman Islands. Family court judges require full transparency when transferring a minor's financial guardianship. If I sign this without a verified routing destination, the bank will automatically freeze the transfer." Serena let out a loud, frustrated scream, grabbing her own hair. "Just sign the stupid papers, Kendra," she yelled hysterically. "He needs the money to clear his accounts today. You are going to get us all killed." I am simply protecting my child from federal fraud charges, I replied smoothly, turning to the third page. I dragged the process out relentlessly. I questioned the specific legal phrasing of the asset forfeiture clauses. I forced Liam to explain exactly how the funds would be structured once they left domestic soil. He was sweating profusely, pacing around the dining table like a caged, terrified animal. Every time he tried to physically snatch the papers away from me, I calmly reminded him that an incomplete signature would render the entire transfer instantly void. I watched the large grandfather clock tick forward. 11 minutes had passed. The extraction team would be inside the house by now. They would be lifting Lily into their secure arms and rappelling down the back wall to a waiting armored vehicle. 12 minutes. It was done. I stopped asking questions. I flipped the stack of documents to the final signature page. I pressed the pen against the paper and signed my full name. I pushed the signed contract across the table. Liam snatched the papers instantly, letting out a loud laugh of pure relief. "You really thought you could outsmart me?" Liam mocked, his arrogant smirk returning. Suddenly his cell phone began to ring loudly. He answered the call, still grinning triumphantly. "What is it?" he asked. His phone slipped. "Lily is gone." The heavy mahogany doors swung inward. Chandeliers cast a warm glow over Atlanta's elite power players. Senators, real estate moguls, and investors stood in tight circles sipping champagne. I paused at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at them. My family had worshipped this crowd my entire life. They sacrificed my childhood, my mental health, and my innocent daughter to secure a seat at this table. Tonight I was going to burn it all straight to the ground. I began my descent. I held my head high, projecting the ruthless authority of a woman who owned the room. Slowly, the lively chatter near the staircase began to falter. Heads turned in my direction. Wealthy guests nudged their partners, whispering quietly as they took in the unfamiliar, commanding presence entering their exclusive sanctuary. My mother, Vivian, was standing near the towering champagne fountain. She played the role of the proud matriarch to perfection. Her eyes drifted casually toward the staircase. The moment she recognized my face, the crystal flute slipped right through her trembling fingers. It shattered loudly against the polished marble floor. Vivian gasped, her hand flying to her chest in pure terror. Serena noticed the commotion and whipped her head around. When she saw me walking confidently across the ballroom floor, her face contorted with panicked anger. She whispered something frantic to her wealthy friends, abandoned her circle, and marched aggressively in my direction. She intercepted me near the center of the room, blocking my path. "Are you completely insane?" Serena hissed, keeping a tight fake smile plastered on her face for the watching guests. "How did you get past the security desk? You are going to ruin the most important night of our lives. I will have the guards throw you out into the street where you belong." I simply forced Serena to step backward. "You are more than welcome to call security, Serena," I replied, my voice dangerously calm. "But you might want to check the VIP guest list first." I pulled the embossed platinum access badge from my clutch and held it up. Serena stared at the heavy metal credential. Her arrogant sneer vanished instantly, replaced by absolute confusion. She recognized the specific color and insignia. It was the highest possible investor clearance reserved exclusively for the billionaires Liam was courting tonight. "This badge is issued directly to the Chief Executive Officer of Kendra Lilly Holdings," I explained, leaning in so she could hear every single devastating syllable. "I am the mystery buyer who owns the exact center of Liam's downtown development project. Your husband begged my firm to attend tonight. If you throw me out, his investors will follow me right out the door." Serena paled, her mouth opening and closing silently. She looked wildly around the room, realizing her absolute powerlessness. I offered her a cold, deadly smile. "Enjoy the party, sister. It is going to be a memorable evening." I bypassed her completely and walked straight toward the front of the ballroom. I found the most prominent table positioned directly in front of the main presentation stage. I took my seat, crossing my legs elegantly, placing my clutch on the pristine white tablecloth. Vivian was watching me from across the room, unable to process how the daughter she abused for decades was sitting in the most powerful seat in the house. The grand ballroom lights dimmed slightly. A hush fell over the wealthy crowd. The heavy velvet curtains on the main stage parted, and Liam strode confidently up to the polished glass podium. He flashed a brilliant, charismatic smile that easily masked the sheer desperation bleeding through his veins. He looked out at the audience, projecting the perfect image of an untouchable visionary real estate mogul. Then his eyes scanned the front row and locked directly onto mine. Liam faltered. His confident stride hitched, and he gripped the edges of the glass podium so hard his knuckles turned completely white. He stared at me sitting in the VIP section, looking nothing like the defeated mother he tried to break this morning. He knew instantly his extortion plan failed. He knew Lily was gone. He knew I possessed the financial leverage to destroy him. But he was trapped on stage surrounded by hundreds of investors he owed money to, with a brutal Miami cartel breathing down his neck. He had no choice but to proceed with his fabricated pitch. "Good evening, distinguished guests." Liam began, his voice shaking noticeably before he cleared his throat to steady it. "Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate the future of Atlanta's downtown expansion. We are building a legacy of trust, generational wealth, and unparalleled community values." The sheer hypocrisy of his words tasted like poison. I did not break eye contact with him. I slowly picked up my clutch and stood up from the table. I moved gracefully toward the dark, shadowed perimeter of the ballroom, blending seamlessly into the edges of the crowd. Liam watched me move, panic flaring brightly in his eyes, but he was forced to keep speaking to his audience. He gestured grandly toward the massive LED screens covering the back wall of the stage. "I would like to show you a brief presentation detailing the incredible financial opportunities we have secured for our partners," Liam announced, clicking a small remote control in his sweating hand. I slipped quietly through a side door, leading to the hidden audiovisual control booth. The lone technician sitting at the control board looked up in surprise as I entered. I did not speak. I simply handed him a thick envelope containing $10,000 in untraceable cash. He peeked inside, nodded once, and quietly walked out of the booth, leaving me completely alone with the master servers. I stepped up to the main terminal. The glowing monitors displayed Liam's slick promotional video preparing to launch. I quickly retrieved the black encrypted USB flash drive and plugged it firmly into the master port. I tossed my car keys directly back onto the safehouse kitchen counter. Driving my own vehicle to a highly exclusive billionaire-tier event would not project the level of untouchable power I needed tonight. I needed to arrive like a conquering queen, not a desperate accountant. Mrs. Higgins saw the calculation forming in my eyes and pointed me toward the master suite. I prepared for this exact scenario years ago, keeping a tactical go bag securely locked in my trunk for high-level federal extraction cases. I retrieved the heavy duffel bag and carried it into the spacious bathroom. I unzipped the reinforced canvas and pulled out a sleek garment bag. Inside rested a custom-tailored floor-length emerald green gown. I had purchased this specific dress for a deeply covert sting operation in New York 2 years prior, but tonight it would serve a far more personal and devastating purpose. The dark silk draped flawlessly over my figure, hugging my curves and projecting an undeniable, intimidating authority. I spent the next 20 minutes applying my makeup with ruthless surgical precision. I painted my lips a deep, dangerous shade of crimson, rejecting the muted, conservative colors my mother always forced upon me. I swept my natural hair up into a sharp, elegant twist that left my neck and shoulders completely exposed. I slipped my feet into a pair of towering, black stiletto heels. The woman staring back at me from the tall vanity mirror was absolutely unrecognizable from the quiet, scapegoated sister who had walked into the country club this afternoon. She was not a helpless victim begging for scraps of family affection. She was an absolute executioner, and she was fully prepared to draw blood. I picked up my sleek metallic silver clutch from the edge of the bathroom counter. I popped the tight clasp open and looked down at the tiny black encrypted USB flash drive resting safely against the crushed velvet lining. That microscopic piece of plastic held the instantaneous destruction of Liam's entire fraudulent empire. It contained the undeniable proof of his staggering Ponzi scheme, the terrifying Miami cartel connections, and the detailed money laundering pipeline running directly through Vivian's church choir fund. I snapped the clutch shut, securing the digital bomb tightly in my hands. Sending them to a federal prison was simply not enough to satisfy my intense rage. Liam, Serena, and Vivian worshipped exclusively at the high altar of societal prestige. They brutally sacrificed my innocent daughter just to maintain their fake, luxurious facade among the Atlanta elite. Therefore, their ultimate punishment had to be intensely public, spectacular, and utterly humiliating. I was going to completely tear down their artificial kingdom right in front of the very people they desperately wanted to impress. They wanted to play high society games, but they fundamentally failed to realize I literally wrote the rulebook on destroying corrupt institutions. I walked briskly back into the living room. Mrs. Higgins was sitting comfortably on the sofa, reading a colorful storybook to Lily. My beautiful daughter looked up and gasped loudly, her brown eyes widening in pure amazement. "Mommy, you look exactly like a superhero princess," she whispered. I smiled warmly, crouching down to kiss her soft cheek. "I am going to slay the bad dragons tonight, baby. I promise I will be back very soon." Mrs. Higgins walked me to the front door, offering a firm, respectful nod of absolute solidarity before I stepped outside. A heavily armored pitch-black sport utility vehicle was already idling quietly in the circular driveway, arranged specifically by my private security team. The driver, a broad-shouldered former military operative, opened the heavy rear door for me without speaking a single word. I slid smoothly into the luxurious leather-back seat, appreciating the dark-tinted privacy glass. The powerful engine rumbled deeply as we pulled out of the hidden residential compound and merged seamlessly onto the dark highway, heading straight toward the glowing heart of downtown Atlanta. I watched the glittering city skyline slowly approach through the window. The glowing skyscrapers looked like towering, impenetrable monuments of wealth and power, representing the exact world Liam thought he owned. He genuinely believed his Ivy League education, his white privilege, and his aggressive arrogance made him completely untouchable in this sprawling city. He truly thought he could easily manipulate the biased family court system, steal $15 million from a black child, and simply walk away to host a lavish party. My fingers traced the smooth metallic edges of my silver clutch. I let the cold, sharp anger crystallize completely into unshakable, lethal resolve. The armored vehicle smoothly exited the busy highway and navigated directly toward the Grand Plaza Hotel. The streets surrounding the massive, opulent building were entirely blocked off by private security guards and thick velvet ropes. This was the highly anticipated social event of the year for the Atlanta elite. Liam had spared absolutely no expense to create an illusion of impenetrable wealth, desperately hoping to squeeze the final few $1 million from these gullible investors before the cartel came to collect his life. Our sleek vehicle pulled up to the main entrance, joining a long, gleaming line of luxury sedans and imported sports cars. The chaotic flashes of local society photographers illuminated the bustling, crowded courtyard. Elite guests, draped in expensive diamonds and custom tuxedos, spilled out onto the plush red carpet, laughing loudly and exchanging enthusiastic greetings. My driver pulled the large vehicle up to the main valet station, bypassing the standard drop-off queue completely. A uniformed hotel attendant rushed forward, pulling the heavy rear door open. I stepped out onto the red carpet, my stiletto heels clicking sharply against the pavement. The crisp evening air washed over my face. Flashbulbs erupted like bright lightning, capturing the flawless silhouette of my emerald gown. The surrounding wealthy guests completely paused their shallow conversations, immediately tracking my highly confident, powerful stride as I walked gracefully toward the Grand Hotel entrance tonight. The heavy brass doors of the Grand Plaza Hotel swung open effortlessly as I approached. The intense, chaotic energy of the red carpet outside immediately faded, replaced by the hushed, sophisticated ambiance of the opulent lobby. I glided across the polished marble floors, my towering stiletto heels echoing with crisp, rhythmic authority. A sharply dressed concierge bowed his head respectfully, gesturing toward the sweeping velvet-lined staircase that led directly to the main ballroom. I ascended the stairs with deliberate, measured grace. My custom emerald green silk gown trailed beautifully behind me, projecting an aura of undeniable, intimidating power. Tonight was not merely a social event. It was a carefully orchestrated execution, and every single step I took brought Liam closer to his absolute financial ruin. I reached the top of the staircase and paused just outside the massive open mahogany doors of the grand ballroom. The sheer scale of the extravagant event was genuinely staggering. Liam had clearly drained the absolute last of his stolen fraudulent funds to secure this venue. Towering crystal chandeliers cast a brilliant warm glow over hundreds of Atlanta's most powerful elite. State senators, wealthy real estate moguls, and prominent millionaire investors stood in tight circles sipping vintage champagne from crystal flutes. A live jazz band played softly on a secondary stage, providing the perfect, elegant soundtrack for a room completely filled with systemic corruption and fragile borrowed prestige. I scanned the massive crowd, my forensic instincts instantly mapping the complex social dynamics of the room. It took me less than 5 seconds to locate my mother. Vivian was standing near a towering champagne fountain laughing loudly while aggressively schmoozing with the city mayor. She wore a sparkling silver evening gown, playing the role of the proud, successful matriarch to absolute perfection. She looked completely in her element, entirely unbothered by the fact that she had willingly sacrificed her own granddaughter to a violent cartel just hours ago. A few yards away, Serena was actively holding court among a group of wealthy, influential socialites. My sister was literally dripping in massive, blinding diamonds. She wore a dramatic, sweeping white dress, playing the role of the perfect, devoted hostess, while secretly funding her lavish lifestyle with dirty, laundered money. I took a deep, steadying breath and stepped boldly across the threshold into the grand ballroom. The immediate effect of my dramatic entrance was truly remarkable. The lively chatter near the main entrance began to falter almost instantly. Heads turned rapidly in my direction. Wealthy guests nudged their partners, whispering quietly behind their champagne glasses as they took in the unfamiliar, commanding presence invading their highly exclusive sanctuary. The sudden spreading silence rippled outward, like a massive tidal wave slowly consuming the entire front half of the grand ballroom. I kept my head held exceptionally high, radiating absolute unshakable confidence. I did not avert my gaze. I looked directly through the sea of wealthy elites, asserting my rightful place in a room that was entirely built on a mountain of fraudulent lies. Vivian noticed the sudden drop in ambient noise. She paused her enthusiastic conversation with the city mayor and turned her head toward the grand entrance. The exact moment she recognized my face, the crystal flute slipped right through her trembling manicured fingers. It shattered loudly against the polished marble floor, splashing expensive champagne across her designer shoes. Vivian gasped sharply, her hand flying aggressively to her chest in pure terror. Serena heard the loud crash of breaking glass and whipped her head around. When she saw me walking confidently across the center of the ballroom floor, her face contorted with panicked, vicious anger. She whispered something frantic to her wealthy friends, abandoned her circle immediately, and marched aggressively in my direction. She intercepted me near a large, ornate floral arrangement blocking my path to the main tables. "Are you completely insane?" Serena hissed viciously, keeping a tight fake smile plastered on her face for the watching guests. "How did you possibly get past the security desk downstairs? You are going to ruin the most important night of our entire lives. I will have the armed guards throw you out into the dirty street where you belong." I simply stood my ground, forcing Serena to step awkwardly backward to maintain her personal space. "You are more than welcome to call your security guards, Serena," I replied, my voice dangerously calm and razor-sharp. "But you might want to check the exclusive VIP guest list before you make a massive, humiliating scene." I opened my sleek silver clutch, pulled out the embossed platinum access badge, and held it up directly in front of her face. Serena stared blankly at the heavy metal credential. Her sneer vanished instantly, replaced by absolute confusion. She recognized the specific color and insignia immediately. It was the highest possible investor clearance reserved exclusively for the billionaires Liam was desperately courting tonight. "This platinum badge is issued directly to the chief executive officer of Kendra Lilly Holdings," I explained, leaning in so she could hear every single devastating syllable. I am the anonymous, highly sought-after mystery buyer who currently owns the exact center of Liam's proposed downtown development project. Your husband begged my firm to attend tonight. If you throw me out, his most lucrative investors will follow me right out the door. Serena paled drastically, her mouth opening and closing silently like a trapped fish. She looked wildly around the grand room, realizing her utter powerlessness. I offered her a cold, deadly smile. Enjoy the party, sister. It is going to be a memorable evening. I bypassed her completely and walked straight toward the front of the ballroom. I found the exclusive table positioned directly in front of the main presentation stage. I took my seat, crossing my legs elegantly, placing my clutch on the pristine white tablecloth. The grand ballroom lights dimmed slightly. A hush fell over the crowd. Liam stepped up to the podium. He gently tapped the microphone. "Welcome, distinguished guests," Liam announced, his voice booming through the state-of-the-art sound system. The feedback shrieked for a fraction of a second before settling into a smooth, resonant pitch. He adjusted his silk tie and leaned comfortably against the glass podium. To the untrained eye, he looked like the absolute epitome of corporate success. He looked like a man who held the entire city of Atlanta in the palm of his hands. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight to celebrate a monumental leap forward for our beautiful city. We are here to discuss more than just concrete and steel. We are here to talk about family values, unbreakable trust, and the profound importance of building generational wealth. The sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy of his words tasted like bitter poison in my mouth. He spoke passionately about family values while actively planning to drain his 5-year-old niece's trust fund. He preached endlessly about unbreakable trust while simultaneously running a massive fraudulent Ponzi scheme that was actively bleeding the very people sitting in this room completely dry. I did not break eye contact with him for a single second. I sat perfectly still at my prominent table, letting the heavy weight of my unyielding gaze burn directly into his skin. Liam tried his absolute best to project total ease, but I could clearly see the frantic, desperate terror flashing violently behind his bright blue eyes. He knew his extortion plan had completely failed. He knew Lily was gone. He knew I possessed the absolute financial leverage to destroy him. But he was trapped on this brightly lit stage, surrounded by hundreds of investors he desperately owed money to, with a brutal Miami cartel breathing violently down his neck. He had absolutely no choice but to proceed with his fabricated pitch. Atlanta is a city of incredible visionaries. Liam continued, pacing slowly across the wide stage. And my upcoming downtown mega development is designed to honor that exact visionary spirit. We are creating an untouchable legacy that will easily stand the test of time. He paused dramatically, flashing his signature charismatic smile that had successfully conned millions of dollars out of unsuspecting victims. I would like to show you a brief visual presentation detailing the incredible, unprecedented financial opportunities we have officially secured for our exclusive partners. Liam raised his hand, pointing a small plastic remote control toward the back of the massive ballroom. I slowly picked up my silver clutch and stood up from my chair. I moved with deliberate, silent grace toward the dark, heavily shadowed perimeter of the ballroom, blending seamlessly into the edges of the distracted crowd. Liam watched me move, panic flaring brightly in his eyes, but he was forced to keep speaking to his captivated audience. I slipped quietly through a heavy side door leading directly to the hidden audiovisual control booth located behind the main balcony. The lone technician, sitting at the massive control board, looked up in pure surprise as I entered his restricted domain. I did not speak a single word to him. I simply reached into my clutch and handed him a thick white envelope containing exactly $10,000 in crisp, untraceable cash. He peeked inside, his eyes widening dramatically. He nodded once, stood up from his rolling chair, and quietly walked right out of the booth, leaving me completely alone with the master servers. I stepped up to the main terminal. The glowing monitors displayed Liam's slick, highly produced promotional video preparing to launch. I quickly retrieved the black encrypted USB flash drive from my clutch. I plugged the tiny drive firmly into the master port. The military-grade forensic software immediately recognized the closed network. I pulled out my cell phone, connected it to the hidden terminal via a short cable, and initiated the master override sequence. Lines of complex code rapidly cascaded down my small screen as my software aggressively bypassed the hotel's standard security firewalls. My heart beat with a steady, calculated rhythm as I watched the progress bar inch toward 100% completion. I was taking absolute control of the entire audiovisual system right now. On the main stage, Liam confidently pressed the play button on his remote control. He turned gracefully toward the massive 50-foot LED screens covering the entire back wall of the stage, expecting his beautiful computer-generated architectural renderings to appear. Instead, a harsh, jagged line of digital static ripped violently across the massive displays. The bright, colorful holding graphic warped and twisted, fracturing into dozens of broken pixels. A loud, screeching electronic tone echoed through the massive ballroom speakers, causing several guests to cover their ears in pain. The high-definition screens glitched aggressively, flashing blindingly bright white before abruptly plunging into absolute pitch-black darkness. The sudden lack of light on the stage caused a collective, confused murmur to ripple quickly through the crowded ballroom. Wealthy investors shifted uncomfortably in their expensive seats, exchanging annoyed glances. Liam froze. He stared at the giant dead screens behind him, his charismatic smile faltering terribly. He aggressively mashed the button on his remote control over and over again, but the screens remained completely dark. Panic visibly seized his entire body. His perfectly manicured public image was beginning to crack right in front of the very people he desperately needed to impress tonight. He looked desperately toward the back of the room, searching the empty balcony for the audiovisual technician who had just abandoned his post. He wiped a thick bead of cold sweat from his forehead. He turned back to the restless audience, gripping the edges of the glass podium tightly to hide his wildly trembling hands. He tapped the microphone. "Just technical difficulties, folks." Liam laughed nervously, his voice cracking slightly under the immense suffocating pressure. But then a brand new, terrifyingly revealing video begins to quietly play on the massive 50-foot screen directly behind him. He turns to see it right now. The sharp feedback of the microphone echoed through the cavernous ballroom before settling into a crisp, clear broadcast. Liam adjusted his tailored silk tie, gripping the edges of the sleek glass podium. He looked out over the sea of wealthy investors, state politicians, and prominent real estate moguls. He projected the absolute epitome of corporate success and untouchable privilege. "Good evening, distinguished guests," Liam announced, his voice vibrating with practiced charisma. "Thank you all so much for joining us tonight to celebrate a monumental leap forward for our city of Atlanta. We are here to discuss something far more important than just concrete and steel. We are here to talk about family values, unbreakable trust, and the profound importance of building generational wealth." The sheer hypocrisy of his words tasted like bitter poison. He stood there preaching about family values, while planning to drain his 5-year-old niece's trust fund to save his own miserable life. He spoke passionately about unbreakable trust, while running a massive fraudulent Ponzi scheme that was bleeding the very people sitting in this room dry. I did not break eye contact with him for a single second. I sat perfectly still at my prominent table, letting the heavy weight of my unyielding gaze burn directly into his skin. Liam tried his absolute best to project total ease, but I could clearly see the frantic, desperate terror flashing violently behind his bright blue eyes. He knew his extortion plan had completely failed. He knew Lily was safely gone. He knew I possessed the absolute financial leverage to destroy him. But he was trapped on this brightly lit stage, surrounded by hundreds of investors he desperately owed money to, with a brutal Miami cartel breathing violently down his neck. He had absolutely no choice but to proceed with his fabricated pitch. "Atlanta is a city of incredible visionaries," Liam continued, pacing across the wide stage, "and my upcoming downtown mega-development is designed to honor that exact visionary spirit. We are creating an untouchable legacy that will easily stand the test of time." He paused dramatically, flashing his signature smile that had successfully conned millions of dollars out of unsuspecting victims. I would like to show you a brief visual presentation detailing the incredible, unprecedented financial opportunities we have secured for our exclusive partners. Liam raised his hand, pointing a small plastic remote control toward the back of the massive ballroom. I slowly picked up my silver clutch and stood up from my chair. I moved with deliberate, silent grace toward the dark-shadowed perimeter of the ballroom, blending seamlessly into the edges of the distracted crowd. Liam watched me move, panic flaring brightly in his eyes, but he was forced to keep speaking to his captivated audience. I slipped quietly through a heavy side door, leading directly to the hidden audio-visual control booth located behind the main balcony. The lone technician, sitting at the massive control board, looked up in surprise as I entered his restricted domain. I did not speak a single word to him. I simply reached into my clutch and handed him a thick white envelope containing exactly $10,000 in crisp, untraceable cash. He peeked inside, his eyes widening dramatically. He nodded once, stood up from his rolling chair, and walked right out of the booth, leaving me completely alone with the master servers. I stepped up to the main terminal. The glowing monitors displayed Liam's slick promotional video preparing to launch. I quickly retrieved the black encrypted USB flash drive from my clutch. I plugged the tiny drive firmly into the master port. The military-grade forensic software immediately recognized the closed network. I pulled out my cell phone, connected it to the hidden terminal via a short cable, and initiated the master override sequence. Lines of complex code rapidly cascaded down my small screen as my software bypassed the hotel's standard security firewalls. My heart beat with a steady, calculated rhythm as I watched the progress bar inch toward 100% completion. I was taking absolute control of the entire audiovisual system right now. On the main stage, Liam confidently pressed the play button on his remote control. He turned gracefully toward the massive 50-foot LED screens covering the entire back wall of the stage, expecting his beautiful computer-generated architectural renderings to appear. Instead, a harsh, jagged line of digital static ripped across the displays. The bright, colorful holding graphic warped and twisted, fracturing into dozens of broken pixels. A loud, screeching electronic tone echoed through the massive ballroom speakers, causing several guests to cover their ears in pain. The high-definition screens glitched, aggressively flashing bright white before abruptly plunging into pitch-black darkness. The sudden lack of light on the stage caused a collective, confused murmur to ripple quickly through the crowded ballroom. Wealthy investors shifted uncomfortably in their expensive seats, exchanging annoyed glances. Liam froze. He stared at the giant dead screens behind him, his charismatic smile faltering terribly. He aggressively mashed the button on his remote control over and over again, but the screens remained completely dark. Panic visibly seized his entire body. His public image was beginning to crack right in front of the very people he desperately needed to impress tonight. He looked desperately toward the back of the room, searching the empty balcony for the audiovisual technician who had just abandoned his post. He wiped a thick bead of cold sweat from his forehead. He turned back to the restless audience, gripping the edges of the glass podium tightly to hide his trembling hands. He tapped the microphone, trying to project authority. "Just technical difficulties, folks." Liam laughed nervously, his voice cracking slightly under the immense pressure. He swallowed hard, plastering a fake smile onto his pale face. But then a brand new video begins to quietly play directly behind him. The absolute reckoning has successfully begun. He slowly turns to see it right now. It is over. The massive screen illuminated Liam's terrified face in a harsh light. His shoulders slumped as his drunken voice echoed through the speakers, openly mocking the millionaires standing just feet away from him. The silence in the grand ballroom lasted for only a fraction of a second before pandemonium erupted. Furious investors began shouting, hurling crystal champagne flutes that shattered against the stage. Liam realized his fraudulent empire had evaporated into digital dust in less than a minute. His panicked eyes darted across the chaotic room until they locked onto mine. The terror in his gaze instantly morphed into a primal, unhinged rage. He let out a guttural roar that tore through his throat. He leaped off the elevated stage, ignoring the furious crowd, and charged aggressively toward the back corner where I stood. His heavy footsteps pounded against the marble floor, his hands curled into fists. He never made it even halfway down the center aisle. Before Liam could cross the distance, the heavy mahogany doors of the grand ballroom were violently kicked open. The loud crash silenced the screaming investors instantly. Dozens of federal agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation and tactical criminal investigators from the Internal Revenue Service swarmed the lavish space like a tidal wave of dark windbreakers. Their authoritative voices boomed over the remaining static of the hacked sound system, commanding everyone to remain where they stood. The sheer velocity of the federal raid paralyzed the wealthy elite of Atlanta, who watched in disbelief as their glamorous evening transformed into a major crime scene. Two tactical agents intercepted Liam instantly. They never hesitated. They hit him with the force of a freight train, tackling him brutally to the marble floor. His expensive Italian suit jacket ripped at the shoulder seam with a loud tear. His chin slammed against the polished stone, drawing a bright smear of blood. Liam thrashed wildly, screaming incoherent threats and demanding lawyers, but the agents pinned him effortlessly. The sharp, metallic click of heavy steel, handcuffs locking securely around his wrists, echoed with profound finality. The untouchable golden boy of the country club elite was reduced to a pathetic squirming criminal pinned beneath the boots of federal justice. Across the ballroom, a separate squad of agents converged on the floral arrangement where Serena hid. Two female agents grabbed my sister roughly by her bare, shivering shoulders. Serena shrieked in absolute terror, thrashing her body in a desperate attempt to escape their iron grip. "I did not do anything," she screamed hysterically at the top of her lungs, her shrill voice slicing through the heavy air. "I do not know anything about his money. Let me go." The agents ignored her frantic protests, snapping handcuffs tightly around her expensive wrists. Serena collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Thick black streaks of expensive mascara ran down her pale cheeks, completely destroying her flawless facade. The beautiful elite hostess was completely gone, replaced by a terrified accomplice realizing her lavish lifestyle was permanently over. Near the towering champagne fountain, Vivian stood paralyzed in pure shock. Several prominent members of her exclusive congregation, including the mayor and two city councilmen, stepped away from her in absolute disgust. They had just watched the undeniable video evidence of their beloved choir director actively laundering dirty cartel money through their sacred church funds. An older federal agent walked calmly up to my mother. He recited her Miranda rights in a booming voice that carried across the silent, judging crowd. Vivian did not fight. She simply went completely limp, her face drained of all color as the steel cuffs clicked shut around her wrists. The ultimate humiliation was finally complete. The woman who had spent her entire life judging others and preaching moral superiority was publicly arrested for severe federal crimes right in front of the very elite she worshipped. The agents began dragging the three of them roughly toward the main exit. Their path forced them to walk directly past the dark corner, where I stood perfectly still in my emerald gown. Liam glared up at me from the floor as he was hauled to his feet, his eyes burning with a hateful, impotent fury. But he remained silent, realizing he possessed zero power. Vivian kept her head bowed in crushing shame, unable to look her abandoned daughter in the eye. But Serena fought against the agents holding her. She dug her designer heels into the carpet, forcing them to stop right in front of me. She looked up, her face a ruined, desperate mask of running makeup and pure terror. "Kendra, please," Serena begged, her voice cracking with pathetic desperation. "You have to tell them to stop. You have all the money now. You own the firm. Pay them off. You have to help us. We are your family. We are your blood." I looked down at her. I did not feel a single ounce of pity, anger, or sadness. I felt absolutely nothing but a cold, clinical emptiness. I looked at the woman who had happily spent stolen money while my child was kidnapped. I let a long, heavy silence stretch between us, ensuring that every person in our immediate vicinity was listening closely. "Blood makes you related," I stated, my voice an impenetrable mask of absolute unforgiving ice. "Loyalty makes you family. You are nothing to me." I did not wait to watch the federal agents drag her screaming and sobbing through the mahogany doors. I turned my back completely on the pathetic, crumbling ruins of their fraudulent empire. I adjusted the strap of my silver clutch, squared my shoulders, and walked gracefully out of the side exit of the ballroom. The cool, crisp night air of Atlanta hit my face as I stepped out onto the street. Behind me, the wail of dozens of police sirens pierced the dark night, a beautiful symphony, signaling the permanent end of their reign. I smiled, walking toward my waiting car. I was going home to my daughter. 6 months passed in a beautiful, uninterrupted blur of absolute peace. The suffocating anxiety that used to grip my chest every morning was gone, replaced by the gentle warmth of a fresh start. I stood on the expansive glass balcony of my new penthouse, letting the breeze brush against my face. Far below, the bustling streets of downtown Atlanta hummed with energy, but up here it was serene. I took a slow sip of my coffee and turned to look inside through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Lily was sitting happily on a plush white rug in the center of the living room. She was carefully building a towering castle out of magnetic blocks, humming a cheerful tune. The dark shadows of fear that Liam had cast over her face were completely erased. She was safe, thriving, and her trust fund was locked down behind impenetrable legal fortresses I designed. I smiled, feeling profound maternal satisfaction wash over my soul. The universe has a poetic way of balancing scales when you force truth into the light. Liam quickly discovered that his country club connections meant absolutely nothing inside a federal courtroom. The Criminal Investigation Division of the IRS tore his fraudulent real estate empire apart piece by piece. My forensic financial presentation served as the undeniable blueprint for his ultimate destruction. He could not charm his way out of the massive money laundering charges, and his corrupt judge was indicted alongside him. During his highly publicized trial, Liam sat at the defense table looking like a broken, pathetic shell. His expensive designer suits were replaced by a standard orange jumpsuit. The Miami cartel he owed millions to had their assets frozen, neutralizing the physical threat to my family, but Liam still received the maximum penalty. The judge sentenced him to 20 years in a maximum security penitentiary without early parole. I went from drinking vintage scotch in ballrooms to eating terrible food in a guarded cell block. Serena experienced a completely different, yet equally devastating type of prison. When the government seized all of Liam's assets to pay back his victims, they took everything my sister valued. The sprawling suburban mansion, the imported luxury vehicles, and the massive closets filled with designer dresses were auctioned off. Serena was left with nothing but crippling debt and a legally mandated order to pay financial restitution. She desperately tried reaching out to wealthy friends for help, but the high society women of Atlanta dropped her instantly. To them, she was a toxic liability. Today, my sister spends her days wearing a scratchy polyester uniform, working 40 hours a week as a retail cashier. She stands on her feet all day, ringing up cheap merchandise for minimum wage, constantly humiliated by her new reality. Every single paycheck she earns is heavily garnished by the federal government. There are no more diamond necklaces or lavish luncheons for Serena. She is trapped in the exact miserable existence she used to aggressively mock. My mother did not fare any better. Vivian managed to avoid a lengthy prison sentence by accepting a plea deal, but her punishment was deeply poetic. She was placed under strict house arrest for 5 years. A heavy black monitoring ankle bracelet is permanently strapped to her leg, ensuring she cannot leave her downsized apartment. Her ultimate downfall, however, was total excommunication from the First Zion megachurch. The congregation was horrified by the undeniable proof that their beloved choir director was actively laundering dirty cartel money. They stripped her of her title, banned her from the premises, and publicly denounced her actions. The wealthy mayor and prominent councilman she used to aggressively schmooze completely severed all ties with her. Vivian is entirely alone now. She sits in her quiet living room day after day, completely isolated from the prestigious social circles she worshipped. She traded her family for status, and in the end, she lost absolutely everything. I refused to let my journey end with simply destroying the people who tried to break me. I took my personal wealth and forensic financial skills and channeled them into a highly impactful venture. I officially opened a nonprofit legal and financial clinic located right in the heart of Atlanta. We assembled a fierce team of brilliant lawyers, dedicated social workers, and expert accountants. Our mission is dedicated to helping marginalized women of color fight back against systemic abuse and corrupt institutions. We take on the difficult cases, the desperate mothers facing privileged abusers who try to weaponize the family court system. I teach these brave women how to track hidden assets, uncover financial abuse, and reclaim their independence. I use my own painful history as the ultimate catalyst to dismantle the corrupt systems that allow men like Liam to thrive. Every single time we win a case and return a child to their rightful mother, I feel a piece of my own past completely heal. I finished my coffee and set the ceramic mug down on the glass patio table. The morning sun was climbing higher into the bright blue sky, casting a brilliant light over Atlanta. I leaned against the balcony railing, taking a deep, cleansing breath of the fresh air. I thought about the quiet, scapegoated sister who used to desperately seek her family's validation. That timid woman was completely gone, incinerated in the fire of their betrayal, and reborn stronger than titanium. They severely underestimated my intelligence, my resilience, and my absolute devotion to my daughter. They thought they could discard me like trash, but they only succeeded in unlocking my ultimate potential. I looked out over the glittering city skyline, knowing I had built an impenetrable fortress of love, security, and power for Lily. I was no longer the designated victim in their twisted family narrative. I was an untouchable queen standing entirely on my own 2 feet, dictating the terms of my own beautiful destiny. And this was without a single shadow of a doubt an absolute sweet victory.